Welcome back. In today's video, I'm going to share what I believe are the 10 steps both of the two personality types will want to take to heal from codependence. Now, if you're unsure which type you are, go back and watch my previous video about the two codependent types. The one is the classic underempowered, what we all think of codependents, the ones that try and take care of everybody. But what few people recognize is the polar opposite of that, the falsely empowered. This is the typical very successful person. What most people don't realize is the grandiose, anti-dependent, needless and wantless, arrogant, detached, the uber successful person is highly codependent. What we all think is what we all want to strive to become is just the polar opposite. And neither side is in reality, because what's really happening here is that each is stuck in a childlike state. And so they're taking feelings from the past and bringing them forward. And so recovery is all about recognizing, one, that's what we're doing. In other words, getting into reality, because neither is in reality as an adult. They're stuck in that childlike state, bringing feelings from the past and reacting from those as an adult, but they're actually not adult in those moments. And that's why we see so much discord in relationships, politically, socially in the world right now, is whichever dynamic they're on, everybody's in codependence. And that's why everyone's so volatile. And so the key in these steps is getting into reality that this is all of us, both sides of it. And Alice Miller has a great quote that talks about the need to get into reality and what's going on and why everybody is stuck into codependence. Now, she uses a couple different terms to discuss the personality types. I switched those in this quote just for clarity, because if you threw out other names, you'd be like, what's that about? So they aren't the words she chose, but I put this in. And this comes from her book, The Drama of the Gifted Child. And she says, both the underempowered and the falsely empowered person completely deny their childhood reality by living as though the availability of the parents could still be salvaged. The falsely empowered person does this through the illusion of achievement, and the underempowered through their constant fear of losing love. Neither can accept the truth that this loss or absence of love has already happened in the past, and that no effort whatsoever can change this fact. That's the stumbling block for everybody in codependence, is the ones that are trying to take care of you or take care of others are still trying to get mom and dad to stop abandoning them and take care of them. And those that are pursuing achievement are trying to fill the hole of shame that mom and dad didn't recognize. And if I achieve, I'll get this love. But neither side will ever get it. That ship has sailed. And so now we have to do the repair work as adults and separate out that we're bringing our childhood pain into the present. We're not actually adult and moderate. We're all reacting from a childlike state. And that's why I personally believe everybody's codependent. I haven't met anyone who's not. So let's get into the 10 steps. And getting back into reality, creating the framework so we can act from that adult, mature place with moderation. For the falsely empowered, the first step is self-esteem. And they're really struggling with that sense of self because they think that if I give to others and do for others, that elevates myself, when it does the opposite. Now, if you want to get into much more detail of the steps I lay out to build self-esteem, I suggest you watch a previous video of mine called How to Build Self-Confidence. That's a great video to lay out the steps if you're on that side of the dynamic. The second step for the underempowered is to stop shaming themselves. They tend to spend a lot of time in guilt and shame, especially over the thought of doing anything for themselves or spending any part of their life that's not focused on others. That's critical for them, is to heal that toxic shame. And so I suggest another video of mine, How to Heal from Toxic Shame, to overcome that. The third step is they need to start asking for and meeting their own needs and wants. They're so busy taking care of everybody else, they are needless and wantless, and they feel guilt and shame at doing anything or asking for anything. And that is a big step because they're chasing their mom and dad as they give. They don't realize they're depriving themselves and the other person. So that's the next step they have to take. The fourth step is they have to start taking care of themselves first. They got trained that the only way they could survive in childhood and get mom and dad's attention was to give themselves away. So they need to ask themselves questions like, what do I really like? Who am I really? What really matters to me? And those are tough questions. Most of the time they won't have answers to them. And that's why they have to start looking at that, is stop focusing outside and start focusing internally. Number 5 is they need to learn to share what they really think and feel. You know what this is like as the underempowered codependent. Inside, you're generally boiling with anger and resentment at how much you're doing for others, but you're not voicing it. And you might get passive aggressive or whatever, or many other different types of way to get out your thoughts and feelings, or you expect them to mind read and just know what you think and feel. Well, that's why they need to learn to start being direct with their communication, because they had to suppress all of that in childhood. So they have to learn to actually get their voice. All right, number 6, this is critical, is the underempowered codependent generally always starts any problem with a significant other or friendship as he or she made me feel, or made me do, or made me think. Nobody ever makes us think, feel, or do anything. We are responsible for our feelings. We are responsible for our thoughts. We are responsible for our actions. We always have a choice. Codependents always put that responsibility on others because they're stuck they're not in reality that in that moment when they're saying, you made me feel, they're a child looking up at their parents going, you did this to me. That's the proof that they are not in reality and they are stuck in that childlike state, reaching back to the past, is they are saying, he or she made me think, feel, or do anything. That's the next piece they have to address. Number 7 is get into reality. They don't realize that their being nice is actually manipulative. It's not genuinely nice. And the proof of that is the hidden anger and resentment and how they keep score of all the things they do for others, of how they have health problems, relationship problems. Their whole life has all this chaos and catastrophe in it because they're giving themselves away, being nice. Well, the truth is they're not being nice because what they're hoping for is love in return. They want recognition. They want to be noticed. Well, that means they're doing it to barter, and they're not in reality that this actually isn't nice. I'm not saying they're not nice people. At their core, they're truly beautiful people. It's that they were trained to be nice in a way that's not nice and is actually manipulative, and they have to get into reality on that. They also have to get into reality that they are filled with anger and resentment. These types will tend to say nothing bugs them, they're always happy, and they're completely detached from how angry and resentful they are at never being taken care of in the abandonment they suffered in childhood. They don't want to admit it or face it. Some do, but they won't deal with it. They suppress it. So they need to get into reality that really their niceness is creating all of the problems in their life. And they're not addressing the hidden anger and resentment. And finally, they have to recognize and get into reality that their focus on others and taking care of others is actually an avoidance of themselves. That they're abandoning themselves just like they were abandoned in childhood. They're setting up their own dysfunctional relationships, their own misery, their own health problems. They're doing it to themselves, and they have to get into reality about that. And they don't see that. So that's step number 7. Step number 8, practice the 3 gets of Al-Anon. I've talked about this in previous videos. The underempowered codependent is constantly on somebody else. The 3 gets are get off their back, get out of their way, get on with their life. Well, when they're on their back, they're totally noticing everything that's going on in somebody else's life. They're on their back, literally watching them and don't do this, and totally taking care of them. Well, it's none of their business. And that's why they have to get out of their way. It's like a friend of mine, or not a friend of mine, a comment on one of my videos. A lady said, well, what about my significant other? He's eating food and doing things. He has a health condition and these things are killing him. They've told him he can't do this, yet he won't stop. She said, am I codependent? I said, well, yes, it's his life. And while your heart is to love him, he gets to live and or die any way he chooses. And that would be the second get out of his way. He wants to live this way. It's none of our business. And that's very difficult for this underempowered codependent. They think it's their business to rescue them and fix them. Well, we need to get off their back. It's not our job. Get out of their way and let them live their life. And then 3, get on with their own life. And that's knowing our needs and wants, speaking our truth, all the things I previously listed. That's what the underempowered needs to get into. All right. Number 8 or number 9, they need to learn to start saying no. They tend to say yes to everything. And because as a child, they couldn't say no, their job was to take care of everybody. They feel tremendous guilt and shame. Well, that's why they need to rebuild this self-esteem and learn about toxic shame, and they can start saying no. And finally, number 10 is setting boundaries. I've talked about this. The best place to learn that is Pia Mellody's Facing Codependence. I highly suggest everybody pick up that book so they learn what healthy boundaries are, because most people think that what they're doing in their relationship is kind and loving, and they don't realize they are boundaryless and they are actually creating negative consequences. Okay? So now let's move on to the falsely empowered, the 10 steps. For them, it's self-esteem as well. They are grandiose, over-empowered, and think they have self-esteem because they achieve so much. You know, it reminds me of a client of mine who's on this falsely empowered side. And he's been working on codependence. Never thought he was. Like, what do you mean, Kenny? I'm fine. My childhood, no, it doesn't bug me. And then there's massive abandonment, divorce, like went through all this, but he's chased achievement. As he said to me, you know, early on, he's like, look, Kenny, I've got the 3 W's, watches, wine, and wealth. Like everything's good. Yet his family's falling apart. There's all these difficulties in his life. It's because he's overachieved and doesn't realize that achievement is, he's trying to use that to cover over his lack of self-esteem. You know, I've got the money, I've got the houses, I've got all this stuff. Yet he's bankrupt inside because that's what he tried to fill it with. And so they need to learn and watch that same video, how to build self-confidence. Number 2 for them, because remember, they are detached and invulnerable, they need to start asking for and getting support. They are anti-dependent, and they'll do everything on their own. They won't even tell you that they're struggling with something. They need to start opening up and being vulnerable and sharing that I need help, that it's not a weakness. See, that's the childhood. I can't display weakness. I have to be anti-dependent, do it all myself. Well, there's no relationship that can happen from that point. We need to share with each other. And so they need to start asking for and getting support. Number 3, they do the same thing. They have to stop saying he, she made me feel, think, or do. They struggle with this as well. Number 4, they say no, but as a means to gain power over somebody. So they won't have an argument with you because they could lose power. They could lose the argument, which means they lose power. They won't have deep conversations. They won't spend time with you. They're saying, no, I'm just too busy. I've got to make all this wine, all this wealth so that you can have the wine and I can have the watches. And so they're saying no to control. Well, they need to learn to stop saying no as a power mechanism and start saying yes. That's the false empowerment that they use, is they can say no, but they do it incorrectly. Number 5 is they need to learn to be more vulnerable and transparent. They don't share authentically who they are, what they've been through. It's very superficial. It's covered over to and promotes the achievement aspects of their life, when underneath there's a lot of unhealed pain, and they won't share any of that. All right. Number 6, they tend to have lots of avoidance techniques, their work, their kids, their activities, maybe even addiction. They need to start addressing that their workaholism and their achievement is actually avoidance of themselves and avoidance of the relationship. That their focus on the kids or outside addictions, whether it be food, alcohol, pills, pot, cheating, porn, health issues. Health issues are a great way to avoid intimacy and connection in a relationship. Number 7, they have to stop giving advice. From that powerful position, they tend to always be grandiose and right. And so they're telling people what to do, and they have to learn how to not give advice. Number 8, stop the controlling. The other person's life is none of their business as well. And so how they will demean from that power position of you're too emotional, you want too much, those are all controlling mechanisms where they denigrate the other person and make the other person the problem. And so they have to learn to stop judging, blaming, and criticizing and using that to control the other person. Number 9, they have to get into reality, just like the underempowered. It's very difficult for them to admit that they've been through childhood trauma. Again, like my client, hey, I've got watches, wine, and wealth. My life is fine. Childhood's not a big deal. They also have to get into reality that their outside accomplishments are just an attempt to fill an inner hole. Success is great. We want things, but the people that chase this dynamic of always looking for the wealth and the success and the achievement. This is athletes, actors, politicians, CEOs, those people chasing the dollar and all of that. They're looking for that money to validate themselves, that the accomplishments or the trophy somehow makes them whole. And they have to get into reality that they're using that to avoid the pain of the past, that it's not actually authentic. Finally, that they have to accept, and this is probably the most difficult, they have to accept that they have a problem and that they are the problem. That is very difficult on this side of the codependent dynamic for them to let any of that in. And finally, generally for them, number 10, they have to seek professional help because the level of detachment from reality is much more severe because they have the wine, the watches, and the wealth to go, look, my life's great. And so for them, it's very hard for them to go through all of this. So there you go. There are the 10 steps on both sides of the dynamic. I suggest, again, watch the videos and buy the book, Facing Codependence, for a deeper dive into each aspect of the recovery process. If you think this will help people, please share it. Leave me your comments. And if you like this content, want more of it, subscribe. And as always, enjoy the journey.